Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment. My good friend and co-host Jim Wiegand is not with us today. He is in the Dominican Republic working with some missionaries. And so Jim will not be recording the next couple of podcasts with me, but in his place, I have a wonderful guest that I know you're going to enjoy listening to. His name is Chip Judd. Chip and I were introduced to each other just a little while ago. And I think, and Chip, you can correct me later if I'm wrong, I think we're becoming friends. And
the jury's still out,
okay.
Not sure yet. Just kidding.
Oh,
no,
man.
I'm enjoying it from the start. It's been awesome.
Yeah. And so Chip is a graduate from the Citadel, Bachelor of Arts in Chemistry, Master's in Counseling, has served for over 30 years as a pastor, a marriage and family counselor, a coach, a friend to leaders and teams and organizations. And his current role is serving as a staff pastor at Seacoast Church in South Carolina. So Chip, welcome to the Leading from Alignment podcast.
Glad to be here, man.
So Chip, one thing we like to do when we have a guest on the podcast is get to know them a little bit. We like to hear their conversion story, how they came to Christ. And so would you take a minute or two, or maybe more than that, just to share with us, how did you come to Christ? What was that like? What was that? What were the circumstances surrounding that?
I was raised what I call American heathen, meaning we did not go to church. And I don't mean often. I mean, we did not go to church. I'm number 6 of 7 kids. One sister, the oldest of the 7, was a believer and paid for it dearly. We all gave her a fit. But the bottom line is I was not a believer. Went to college. It was in the 70s. I got into drug, sex, and rock and roll. I always had a weird hunger to know the truth, to figure things out. And I think I came from the philosophical direction. I studied Eastern religions. I did transcendental meditation. I read the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and I was into all that stuff. In other words, the point of that is there was kind of this spirituality to me that was very real to me. But I also knew there's something deeply broken in me, and one of the areas that showed itself, doing drugs, partying, but I also misbehaved with women. I cheated on everybody, including the wonderful lady who's currently my wife. During our dating and engagement, I would cheat on her. And so we got married. And the reason that's an important part of the story is I really, really loved her, but knew I couldn't do this. I was like, dude, what have you done? You just ruined this woman's life. Because I just knew I could not stay faithful. But what that did was it cracked my heart. Just made a crack in the door that I needed help from beyond myself. Went to a church that a couple of people had witnessed to me. And the way they witnessed to me was, we heard this new church in town that's really strange, and you're really strange, so you might like it. So, and it was a charismatic church. And here's the bottom line, John. My wife and I are going out the door, and my wife's raised Southern Baptist, and she was kind of like, man, I'm glad we got out of there. Don't have to go back. And I said, this is what I said to her. I said, baby, I don't know what it was, but I felt something in that room I've never felt before in my life. And I really need to figure it out. So the bottom line is, about 3 weeks later, of course, I'm feeling the pressure to misbehave, and we're back in that church. And literally, the pastor prayed his closing prayer. I didn't know how church works. He, 50, 60 people, and he prayed his closing prayer with his eyes closed. And when he opened his eyes, I was literally standing right here. No altar call, no nothing. And I said, sir, I don't know what you people have, but I need it, and I need it badly. And so he took me in his little office, and I prayed that beautiful, simple little sinner's prayer. And at the same time, what I prayed was, God, if you're real and if you're powerful as you say you are, please help me not rip my wife's heart out of her chest.
Yeah.
And here I sit 46 years later, happily married to the same lady. And just have had an amazing journey with God ever since.
Yeah. What a great story. I love it. That evangelism strategy is very interesting. Strange church, you're strange.
Yeah.
I think it might work. I love it. But it's so, you know what? I never, Chip, that never gets old for me to hear the action of God on our lives at the right moment. And then the longevity of walking with him all these years. What a great story. Thank you for opening up and sharing so transparently with us this afternoon.
Yeah. I'm grateful, man.
So Chip, where along the line, you give your life to Jesus, where along that line, that timeline, did you start to sense a call maybe to pastoral ministry or vocational ministry? How did that happen? Because I think God can call us in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious about the timeline and then maybe some of the circumstances around it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I having no church background, I had no clue how it worked and who was what. And I mean, I wouldn't, pastor, priest, whatever. If anything, I probably had some contempt for them because the versions of Christianity I had witnessed from the outside looking in were not very appealing. Racism and just legalism and just didn't make it look very exciting. So from the moment I got saved, my plan was to go to medical school. And from the moment I got saved, that just disappeared. To this day, I could not tell you any process of remembering how that decision just went away, but it just disappeared. And so then it was, okay, what am I going to do? And bottom line is my wife and I went back to school for a year, got my certificate and taught high school. And during that time, I had gotten like crazy saved. I mean, I just found what my life hungered for and what I wanted to build my life around for the rest of my life. And the pastor I got saved under, I was still way rough around the edges and hair down to my shoulders, probably still cussing a little bit, maybe quit drugs because that took me a couple of months. But he would say, he'd introduce me to somebody. He'd say, hey, John, this is one of my guys, Chip Judd, and he's going to be my associate pastor one day. And I would look at him and I'd say, dude, what is wrong with you? Like, that's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And, I grew up spiritually in a charismatic environment that, the prophetic and stuff like that. Yeah. And probably when the light went on for me was, we had this one couple in to do ministry and they had a word they felt like was from God. And they, in essence, prophesied ministry in my future that I was, and I think I just instantly knew, oh my gosh, they're right. That is it. And I was not in a movement where the next step was to go to seminary. Right. I love to learn, but I was doing a lot of that on my own, and my pastor was great. I read like crazy, love to read. And so I just, everything else professionally, you might say, became secondary and supportive because that was what I wanted to do. I happened to be teaching school. So what would happen is during the summer, I would take on extra duties at church. And then the third summer, I think it was, they actually paid me a little something. And as that summer wound to a close, we all knew that it was time. So I ended my contract with the high school I was teaching at and went full-time on church staff. Sounds crazy now, but literally I had a wife, and by that time, maybe 2 kids, and I literally was paid $100 a week. But here's the deal, John. I didn't care. I did not care. I mean, it's a crazy story, but we were so poor, we would go through McDonald's leaving church and buy one hamburger, and my wife and I would share the bun and feed the hamburger to our daughter. That's how broke we were.
Wow.
But dude, I didn't care.
Yeah.
I was serving Jesus, man. And
Yeah.
here's another important thought, John, in my calling. I've always been somebody in a weird way that people seem to be comfortable talking to. And so what started to happen very early is what now I would know you'd call some form of counseling, coaching, whatever. And that's always been a way God's used me. And so that was just a key element in my calling.
It's interesting to me, a couple of things, that God seems to put the seed of what he's going to use us to do in our mother's womb. It just that there is some of this inherent gifting and passion that he gives us. And the other thing that really stood out to me as you were explaining your call, Chip, is that other people, I think, see that gift in us before we see it many, many times. I remember I gave my life to Jesus at age 16, very similar time frame as you, and in the 70s. And about 2 months into that journey, the one of the guys who was the leaders of this group that we would meet with said, "You're teaching Bible study next week." I was 2 months old in the Lord, and I thought, and I was a very shy person, and I thought, "You've got to be kidding me! I can't do that." And he says, "Yeah, you can do that." So I spent, for a 20-minute Bible study, you're going to like this, I spent like 40 hours getting ready because I was so nervous. I was so worried. And we got to that study, 20 minutes, and it was like, I don't know how to describe it other than like God just took over for 20 minutes and I got done. And the guy looked at me and said, "See, I told you." And
wow.
And I think part of being a good leader is seeing the God-given greatness in people and calling it out of them. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I thought this when you said what you said a minute ago, that a lot of times others see it in us before we see it in ourselves. My thought was this: the guys that scare you are the ones that see it and nobody else does, And but yeah, I mean, I think our job is mostly what you're saying, to call it out. But I would have to say I found that the other side, that what you might call the negative side, people occasionally need someone to say, "No, I don't see that." And because I've seen lots of guys spend 20 years, 25 years building a life of ministry or whatever. And the truth of the matter is they struggle. They never have any, they struggle with 50, 60 people. And I'm not saying that can't be God, but you just have to scratch your head and wonder, is there a better avenue to exercise their gifts? And that's what breaks my heart as much as anything. And the other thing would probably be, John, that sometimes we recognize and call out what's in someone, but we're not very good at helping tailor a plan to develop that.
That's really good. That's really good.
And that would be one of my biggest regrets, John. If you ask me, what do you regret? I regret that I didn't get the help I needed early enough.
Yeah. And I think for me, I had a lot of help, Chip, on the personal walk with God side. Where I didn't have a lot of help was on the calling side. That there wasn't a developmental strategy back then. They kind of just threw people into the ring and said, "Go at it," and let's see what happens. So really, I'm glad you pushed up on that point. I think that's really, really important. Chip, you have, I think, a fairly broad view of the leadership landscape in the church. I'm wondering, from your perspective, what are maybe the top 2 or 3 challenges in the days ahead for the church as it relates specifically to leadership?
I'd probably answer it this way, John, not giving proper focus and attention and strategy to the external environment as it changes and the internal environment and the needs that are not being addressed.
Okay.
In other words, I think, we're not in the same world we were in the 70s and 80s.
That's correct.
I mean, we're just not. We can fuss about it, complain about it, yell about it, whatever, but we're just not. And I find leaders, I enjoy, and it's refreshing to run into a leader who gets that and is willing to think about what are the implications of that, not on the content of our message, but on the context in which we're trying to deliver it and the tone of the message, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But that would be part of my answer. But the bigger piece would be not giving proper attention to their inner life, their inner journey, their own woundedness, their own brokenness. I go to conferences, and I'll be honest, when I go to most pastors' conferences, I spend most of the time angry. And I'm angry because it's a bunch of orphans being pastored and taught by other orphans. And what I mean is we have unresolved father/mother issues that create insecurities and overcompensating strategies to deal with those insecurities.
Yes.
And it comes out in competition, comparison, and all kinds of other ways. So I'll walk the halls on a break, like in a conference, and you got all the vendors and all. And what I see out there are a bunch of orphans just wanting someone they see in some sense as a quote father to just come and impart value to them, notice them, take a minute. And it breaks my heart that the church is filled with orphans and it's being led by orphans. Now, here's what really breaks my heart. There's solutions for all of that.
Yes.
But it takes time. It feels like you're pulling away from your mission momentarily, but if you do it, you re-engage your mission in an entirely different condition.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of mileage out of Matthew 11:20-30. Come to me, all you weary, heavy, broken.
Me too.
I'll give you rest.
Yeah.
How many Christians, leaders do you know, John, that would say that their testimony after receiving Jesus was the most restful life they could imagine?
Probably not one.
And then he goes on to say, take my yoke, which implies, a short leash. Like, don't get ahead of me, don't get behind me.
That's good.
Take my yoke and learn from me. That's not an event, it's a process. And then he says this, for I'm meek and lowly in heart. Of all the things that may mean, one of them is, I'm not going to force myself on you.
Right.
I'm just not. And I'll be honest, dude, don't you wish he would? Don't you wish he'd make us do what we're supposed to do? And then the last phrase is, for my yoke is easy.
Yeah.
And my burden is light. I'm just dumb enough to believe he meant that.
Yeah.
And I believe the reason I don't do well with leaders that talk like they're a victim. I'm so busy. I'm so this, I'm so that, I'm so stressed.
Right.
Here's what I want to say. Who sets your schedule?
Right.
Who decides what you get? Now, my point is not to beat up these guys, myself included. My point is to say, if it's not God driving our schedules and agendas and commitments, then what is it?
Right.
I would say without any hesitation, it's unhealed hurt.
Yeah.
Unhealed brokenness, probably from childhood.
So powerful. It's so powerful. And that's so true in my experience that I feel that most of my pastoral ministry, which was early in my life, was driven by the desire for somebody to pat me on the back and say, John, you're a good man.
Absolutely.
And show appreciation. And that's a terrible way to live. It's a terrible way to lead, because you end up, I think, you end up throwing off Jesus' yoke in those moments, and you do get ahead of him, or you do run behind him. You take on things that he never intended you to take on, and it messes with your emotional well-being. It messes with your relationships. And all of a sudden we've got this convoluted mess on our hands. And the root, so often, I'm working with a client right now who says, John, I'm so driven. So we're trying to drill into that and figure out what on the inside is going on there. What's broken on the inside that we need to address so that this can get resolved. His problem isn't a system problem, Chip. His problem is there's an internal issue there.
Yeah. It's always both and, not either or. Here's an interesting statement I feel like God's had me playing with for several years now. And you know, what I do is I'll get a statement like this, and then what you might call is laboratory test it in working with people. Yeah. And so far, it's bearing out pretty soundly. So here's my deal. Let's take the gentleman you were just referring to, or woman, I don't know. There's something driving, right? So here's the deal. For me, every unhealthy cycle we're caught in is based on a simple formula. You're meeting a right need the wrong way. Now, the fancy Bible perception or concept would be idolatry. You're right need. Is it wrong to need love? No. Is it wrong to need approval? Is it wrong to need, a sense of accomplishment? Absolutely not. But what if I for myself, I learned to get an artificial form of love through sex? What drives unhealthy cycles of behavior? Right need, wrong source. It wasn't wrong that I needed love and intimacy, but I'd learned to seek fulfilling that need the wrong way. Yeah. I never felt like I made my father proud. I want to feel like I've made people proud, and you project that onto whoever. Well, my church has got to grow. I've got to have this many followers. I've got to have whatever it might be, and it's a right need, wrong source. And then what it does is it simplifies the journey. Well, if you buy into that, then the answer is, what's the need at the bottom of this? Right. And what's a healthier, more God-honoring way of getting that need met?
Well, that's so good. It's so conceptually, that is so simple to grab onto. I know in practice it's going to be harder to figure that out, but I just love the simplicity of that. Chip, we're bumping up against time, believe it or not. I'm wondering, would you like to continue? Can you continue this conversation with me? We'll have to wrap up this podcast, but would you join me for another one?
Yeah, love to.
Awesome. Well, listen, we hope that if you're listening or watching today, that the conversation between Chip and myself has been helpful to you, been encouraging to you. We want you to know that we're here for you. If you need help, you can reach out to us at convergecoach.com, select contact us, and we'll give you 30 minutes of our time, and we'll figure out, hey, maybe we'll be able to help you. And if we can't, we'll find somebody who can help you. But the things that we're talking about today, I think, hopefully are going to stir some things up in your thinking and maybe even in your heart. And we want to help come alongside you to figure some of those things out. So Chip, thanks for joining us for episode 151 today. And we're glad you're going to be joining us for episode 152. We want everybody who's listening and watching to know that we're rooting and praying for you as you continue to lead from alignment.